Okay, as you start working with JavaScript a little bit more, you'll start learning how to add more interaction to your website. And one of the features that I really like, and it comes from the JQueryUI .com. And again, you got to remember jQuery UI is a subset library of uh, jQuery, which is a subset library of JavaScript. So it's all JavaScript, but what they've done is they created methods and functions to make your life easier when it comes to adding interaction to your website. So one of the ones I like to use is a dialog box or a dialog widget. And what the dialog allows you to do is allows you to format the dialog to have a certain color scheme, and then you can actually add any type of content inside your dialog box itself. It could be a table, it could be an image, it could be a graphic, or a map, so it could be anything. Now, for example, I'm just going to put in an alert here. Um, in my doc ready. What that means is in doc ready, when the page loads, it runs this script. So when I save this and I launch this, let me refresh here, I get an alert. The alert is a very simple box that has the text in it, and it has an OK button. So what's the difference between that and the dialog box? Well, the dialog box is more allows you to control the formatting. You can actually add more than one word or one line of text, and you can have paragraphs of text if you wanted to on that part, which is great on that. So that's something that I think is a really important feature to add to any type of website. So here in this little box I brought up here, you can see that it automatically has what we call the dialog box, which is made up of different parts. We have what we call our title bar, and then we have our dialog content. That's where all your text or that's where your graphic is going to go. And then you can actually, with the dialog widget, you can actually go in and control other things, such as you can, if you don't want the dialog box to be resized, you can actually go in and control that. You can tell it if you don't want it to be moved around on the page, then you can also tell that as well. So there's many different properties for that. But a dialog box is very similar to this. And then there's usually a button that allows you to close on that. So what's really nice about this is the properties you're able to format, because with alert you cannot format the text that's on there. You cannot go in and fit this to your color scheme. So let's go back to my code real quick. For this to work, in our head section I need a script that links to my jQuery library. Now keep in mind the library keeps updating. Right, currently it's up to I believe 3.11, but this library version will still work. So this number will probably change depending on when you're viewing this video. Then you also need a script, so it goes to the jQuery Ui Min Library. So both of these are needed. So these you have to download from the jQuery site and jQueryUI.com site. And it's just if I go into my folder structure at this time and I go to my JS folder, I have them listed right here. And these are just all the methods and functions that they've created for make sure the library works. I also have in my scripts section right here in line 15, I have a script section. This is where all my scripts going to go. And I'm going to have a document ready, which means that when the page loads, that's when the script runs. So that's already in place. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this alert because I don't need it anymore. But again, notice I already have this in place here. I already have the two other scripts. So for this to work, you need to have this information in place first. Now, here comes the easy part. So how do I create a dialog box? Well, there's two parts. You need to have the title and then you have to have the content. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it all the way here down at the bottom right before my closing body tag, because what the dialog box is going to do by default, it's going to place the dialog box in the middle of your page. So it really doesn't matter where you place it, but I wouldn't put it in the middle. I would put it either at the top or the bottom. So the first thing you need here is another div tag. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a div tag. I'm going to say ID equals, and then I'm going to give it a name. This name can be anything, just keep in mind you can't have spaces. I'm going to name it dialog so it just makes more sense for what we're doing, but you don't have to name it dialog. And then the most important part is the title. So when we put in the title attribute, anything we put in quotation marks, that's going to be added to the title bar. Okay. Now inside the div tag, so I have the closing div tag here for this. Inside it is going to be your content. Now what can you add? Well, you can add images, you can have text, you can apply different formatting to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the image I have up here in my logo. I'm just going to copy and paste it down because I want to kind of brand that image that the logo is important. And I'm also it's going to actually apply the style that I have applied here, class format image, which basically has a float added to it. So that means that any text I have added afterwards is going to wrap around the image. And so now I'm just going to have a paragraph of text. Or again, anything you add to a web page, you can actually add here in the dialog box, but it has to go within the div tag. So in this case, all I'm doing here is I'm adding a paragraph tag, and I'm saying if you join our league in the month of March, I'll take 25% off my league dues, and here's the closing paragraph tag. So again, as long as you can put anything in between the opening and closing div tag that you would do on a regular page. Now when I save it, let's just take a look what it looks like. It puts the information down here at the bottom because that's where I place it. So the thing that we're missing here is we have to apply the dialog function so it automatically creates that dialog box that we want. So back in my code, all I'm going to do is I have to basically tell it to look for this div tag. Gotta look for this div tag. And since we added ID, we've basically identified that as dialog. So up here in doc ready, I'm going to scroll up here. I'm going to start off, when we're working with jQuery, you always start off with a $sign. And then in parentheses, within quotation marks, we put in what we're trying to select. Since I'm selecting the ID, I'm going to go in and put a hashtag, just like you do in CSS, dialog. That's the name of the ID. If it was a class, you would do dot. If it's just an element name, you just type in the element name, such as H1. So it has to go in the quotation marks. Then I go in, I say dot, and I say dot dialog, parentheses, semicolon. That's the name of the widget function you're going to apply. So it'll take whatever is up here in our Jquery Ui Min library, and it's going to apply it to that div tag. So now let's take a look at it. It's right here in the middle, and I can physically move this around. So, but what's missing? Well, the formatting. So half the battle is not the JavaScript or jQuery. Half the battle is actually formatting your content to make that dialog box to look, just make it easier to read. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to add some styles to this. So that way we can control that. Now I'll click on the close button. That does close the dialog box, but it does put it right there in the center. So now we have to concentrate on styling. Just like some of the other videos I've created with jQuery UI, you have to concentrate on the styling. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm opening up my style sheet. I'm going to put the styles down here at the bottom. And what I need to do is I want to go in and concentrate on the content area of my dialog box. So there's a variety of things you're going to have to use, and the first thing you have to understand, as I talked about these in other videos, is that when you use jQuery UI, they also come with its own theme framework. That means that there's certain ways you have to type in for your style sheet for certain things to be applied correctly to the dialog box. So this is where you have to go back in and you go to, like, for example, jQuery's website. And for example, we'll click on dialog here, and when I click on API documentation, this will take you with all the list of information of what properties and methods you can apply to the dialog box. But down here in the very bottom, you'll see it called theming. And if you want to apply a certain style to a certain area of your dialog box, you have to go in and use this theme. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to adjust the content. I'm going to have a style that affects the UI dialog content area. So in our style sheet, what I do here is I simply going to go in and I'm going to start with the content. I'm just going to say dot UI, I got to put a dot in because they're considered as a class. And I'm going to say hyphen dialog hyphen content. And then I'm going to put my curly braces in. Okay. Now, here comes regular CSS. So you have to know CSS to go and make some adjustments. So what we'll do here is I'm going to make sure that we have a background color white, and we'll also change our color of our font, and I'm going to go in and change and have a border around it. Now we have more stuff. I'm only going to put these three things in here real quick. So these are just common CSS styles, and what I want to do is I just want to see what it looks like when I have just these three colors. See how that is? So it's adding white, it's changing the background color to white, it's adding the text and being a little more gray. So notice the image doesn't fit. So what we can also do is we can basically go in, I'll put in some other styles that control the minimum height. So that way we have some, that way we don't have the graphic going outside my dialog box. So I have to control that height aspect. And then I might adjust some the positioning of certain areas in there. And so that's simple to do, to go in and adjust. Okay, so what I've done here in my style sheet, I've added some extra styles here to control the extra padding. I've changed the height to auto so it automatically increases the height. But I also want to turn on the min height so that way I don't have the graphic going outside it. So it has to be a certain height in the beginning. But if I start adding other text to my dialog box, it's going to expand automatically. So let's take a look what it looks like. So here's, you got the graphic, you have the text over here on the right hand side, and again the graphic is floating because of the one class. There's a style being applied to that one class for the image to float left. So if I didn't do that, then this text would be actually below the image on that. So again, remember, you can format any of the content in here. So if you want to center your text, you can do that. Right now I'm just formatting my dialog box to make it easier to read. Now let's switch gears to the title section. So here, as you can see, I'm going to probably have to add a background color. Now I want to try and match my color scheme, so I'll probably use the green for that. And then I want the text to kind of stand out as well. I'm going to probably, you probably want to add some padding so that way the text is not so close to the edge. So that's where padding comes in play. You probably want to control the height a little bit so that way, make sure the button is fitting in there exactly the way you want. And I'm going to make it stand out, so I'm going to add some bold to that as well. Now to do that, I'm going to go back to my style sheet, and I want to apply a style to the title bar. So in this case, I'm doing a .ui hyphen dialog hyphen title bar. Put my curly braces in. I keep putting square brackets, but hey, and then what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to add some padding. I'm going to work with put in positioning in here so that it positions correctly. So again, nothing major, but I'm putting the padding in, I'm putting the height, I'm changing the background color, I'm adding in a font color, and I'm making the text bold. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So as you can see here, Golf Special is there, and you see the height of the green background. Now we need to get this dialog box or this button over here moved to the right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure we have some extra spacing around Golf Special. And I'm going to make sure it's floated to the left, so that way it gives us a little more control when we have things up here in the title bar, because float is a great way of doing it. Now to adjust the title area only, not the close button, but the title area, then you have to add another style. Okay, this time you have to add a style that says .ui hyphen dialog hyphen title. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little float left. I'm going to add some margin around the content of that. And when I come back and I reload here, I want you to pay attention of how the button here goes a little bit to the right. Okay, so that margins come into play and then the floats come into play. Now I want to move this close button over here to the right, and I'm going to actually use, I'm going to work with positioning of it. So I'm going to make it, going to go in and adjust the position so it's absolute, and then I have to go in and say, okay, from the right side, move it over, and from the top, move it down. So I'm going to be using the button here, and I'm going to use the position absolute to do so. Now with that, again, you will be using a style that affects just that close button. So in that regards, I'm going to have another style here that's going to go to the UI dialog title bar hyphen close. So again, this is where you have to know the jQuery and the theme work to understand what's going on here. And so I'm basically just going to go and adjust and add, for this, I'm just going to show you what the position is. So what we're doing is we're physically changing the position of that within that div section, and I'm telling it to be from the right side and from the top. Now this is where you kind of have to experiment some with that, because sometimes depending on the size that you have to adjust it accordingly. So now I'm going to come back over, I'm going to reload. See how that is over here? It's moved it down, but of course we have an issue that at the top it's just too far down. So I'm going to move it upwards. And how am I going to move it upwards? I'm going to basically go in and use a negative value for margin. I'm also going to add a little extra padding there as well. So I'm just going to go in and modify this real quick. And I'm adding a little extra margin. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying negative 10 pixels. And when I do that, it should move the close button upwards. See how that goes? Now you might want to move it up a little even farther. Okay. Now a lot of people also ask me, can you control that size of the button? Yes, you can. So what I can do here is I can go back into my style and I can say height 25px, and I'll put in width 50px. So you can see that it gets a little bit larger, and it's about 25 pixels anyways. So that's something that you can go in and make adjustments for if you needed to. So again, if you want to move it up a little bit, now the good thing is that you can also go in and add a background image. So if you don't want the word close and you want an image of an X or something like that, you can actually go in and do so. So we can go back in, we can do some other manipulation to our styling, but notice what we started off with. It was hard to read. So now you have to go in and concentrate on styling. That's what we did with all these styles here. So that's where you have to understand the framework and understand what we're typing in. And so this is all CSS here except for our classes that we're applying styles to. So half the battle with a lot of the jQuery UI stuff is not applying jQuery, it's actually applying the styling. Now, as I mentioned before, we can go in and change certain properties of the dialog box. And within the dialog widget, you have all these options that you can change. So you can actually go in and, if we want to make it resizable, we can do so. So right now, if I refresh this, I can move this anywhere I want on my page, but I'm not be able to resize. Now granted, I don't know if, you have to know what type of content you have that you need to make sure it resizes. So with that regards, what you can do here is that I have to go back to my regular code, and I have to manipulate the dialog function here, and to do so, to put properties, we're going to put in curly braces within the parentheses. I'm just going to press my enter key. Okay, so anytime you want to add properties to a dialog box, you have to put in parentheses within the curly braces. So I'm going to add curly braces there. And for example, if I want to type in, I'm going to try type in one aspect. I'm going to say draggable. And at the end, you separate it with a colon, not a semicolon. I'm going to say false. I'm going to end with a comma. Don't end with a semicolon. In jQuery UI properties, when you separate it by a comma. So now I'm going to save this and let's launch this real quick. Now, I cannot drag and move this dialog box around. So if I go to the title bar, I can't move it around. So there's so many different properties you can go in and make changes to. You just have to remember you can place it right in between the curly braces within those options. So that's something to take a look at if you're looking for something more on that part. So the jQuery UI documentation does a great job showing those properties.